Hi, I wanted to shoot a little video here just to kind of explain the ring method I see on the forum, and I've got a buddy that just started playing and trying to explain the ring method on how to adjust for the wind. Um, and with my buddy having newer clubs, he's discounting the wind because it's only a mile, 2 miles, 3 miles an hour. It's like, it doesn't really affect the ball that much. But just to kind of give you an idea that if you learn how to use the ring method or whatever method, but as long as you're allowing for the wind, adjusting for it. And the ring method, I think, is the easiest because you can get the angle right. If you're trying to eyeball it, I see a lot of guys that are, they eyeball it. They've been playing for a long time and they just adjust for it. And sometimes it works out and sometimes it doesn't. Whereas if they use the ring method where they had a better angle, they'd be more accurate on those shots. So one of the resources that you can use that's fairly new to the community is Golf Clash Notebook IO. And this site has everything that's happened in Golf Clash since it started. It gives you information on every club, all the tours, all the courses, every tournament that's happened and where it was, and it's an absolutely excellent resource to be using. Also, when you go down through the ring method, you're going to see videos here from Zachary Jones, Cam, Golf Clash Tommy, and while Tommy doesn't use the rings, he absolutely knows what's going on with them, and Zachary is the master of the rings, and Cam being with Golf Clash Elite, these guys are some of the best in the game and can definitely teach you about it. The problem is that they're so good, it's sometimes confusing when you watch them on how to calculate and how to adjust for the ring. So just something for like the beginning player just to kind of help you out is why I'm shooting this video. Okay, so the first step in the ring method is you need to know the accuracy of your club. So you're going to need to make yourself a little cheat sheet. And so the first thing you want to do is go into your bag, and you can get this stuff on the Golf Clash notebook, but just going into your bag, and you're going to look at whatever clubs you're using, whatever your bag is. And you're going to open up those clubs and write down that accuracy. Now you can once again get all of these numbers at Golf Clash Notebook, but since you're looking at your bag, you can go in and look at your bag and pull up your club, and so this level Apocalypse has got a 66 accuracy. So what you're going to do, let me get on the right page here, is you're going to make yourself a cheat sheet. I've got a rookie account, which is my 77 account, and then my main account, which is my odd account. And you're going to make yourself a cheat sheet that has all of the clubs that you're using in that bag. So on 77, it's primary. I kind of switch between the extra mile and the quarterback, just depending, especially during tournaments, I'll switch. My day-to-day wood is the Guardian because my sniper hammerhead aren't high enough level for me to be able to use day-to-day. They don't quite have the distance. My day-to-day long iron is the Saturn. My day-to-day short iron is the Hornet. Then I use a Rapier and Nirvana. And then I kind of switch between the Spitfire and the Malibu, especially during tournaments. If I've got fairway sand traps, then I'm going to use my Spitfire because it hits farther. If I don't have that, or if I'm on par threes and I want to make sure in case I make a small mistake and I end up in the sand, I've got a really accurate club, I'm going to use the Malibu. Same thing with my odd account. I'm going to switch just depending on the hole. My day-to-day, I'm playing in Tour 10, so my day-to-day driver is the Thor's Hammer. I'm using a Sniper, my Saturn, a Hornet, a Rapier, Nirvana, and Spitfire are my day-to-day clubs. So you're going to make yourself a little cheat sheet. Now I play enough that I know what the numbers are without looking, but in my odd account, I don't use my Guardian all the time. I only really use it if I'm in a tournament and I need that club, that wood on certain holes. So it's 1.2 miles per hour per ring, and we'll talk about that here in a second. Whereas on my 77 count, my Guardian, which I use all the time, is a 1.4. So I sometimes, when I'm using it on my odd account, I confuse it with my 77 account, and I do 1.4 instead of 1.2, which doesn't sound like a lot, but when you have 5 rings, That's 1 mile per hour, and that can make a big difference, especially if you're trying to pinpoint land a shot. So making a cheat sheet for yourself when you're playing the game so you know what your club's accuracy is. So once you write down those numbers, you wrote down what the club is, then you can come to, go back to Golf Clash Notebook, and you can go pick your driver. So if you're new, most of the new people are going to want an extra mile. And you're wanting the extra mile because you need that distance, because your woods aren't long enough and you need to get closer with your driver, even though it's not very accurate. Because at level 1, you could look at an extra mile. At level 1, each ring is 3 miles per hour. When you get to level 2, it goes up a little bit. It's 286. And I usually don't worry about the 6. I'm looking at the 28. That usually, and what I usually write down on my cheat sheet is I'm writing down what it is per ring and what the maximum is. So on my cheat sheet I write 2.8, and then I'd write 14.3. So if I encounter a really big wind, I kind of know, like if I move it for the hole from the yellow circle all the way out to the white, then I must have had a 14.3 wind. And this club really doesn't get more accurate until you get to level 5, where you're getting 2.42. And then when you get to level 7, you're at 2.1. So this club doesn't have a lot of accuracy, but the reason people use it is because it has a lot of distance. Whereas if you take a quarterback, and once you get your quarterback, and if we look at the chart here real quick, once you get your quarterback, it becomes almost instantly usable, but it doesn't have distance. But it's super accurate. So if you're playing on a hole in a tournament where you need a little more accuracy and it doesn't really matter that you need distance, the quarterback's not a bad choice. So once you get your clubs written down and you've written down their accuracy, here's how it works. If you have 100 accuracy, that means that each ring is 1 mile per hour per ring. If you have a 95 accuracy, it's 1.1. If it's a 90, it's 1.2. If it's an 85, it's 1.3. If you have a 50 accuracy, that means that you have 2 miles per hour per ring. If you have a 0 accuracy, you have 3 miles per hour per ring. That's why that extra mile at level 1 is 0 accuracy, is 3 miles per hour per ring. So you want to know what those numbers are for each one of your clubs. Now I will say, when we look at clubs, one of the notes on clubs that I want to talk to you about is on rough irons. Now I can't speak to a lot of these rough irons. I've never used the rough cutter. I may have used it when I first started for a few days. I've never used the Junglist, and I can be happy to say that. The machete is really only good if you're on one of those special holes in a tournament where if you do get in the rough, you need lots of backspin. The machete's it, and that's pretty much the only time I would ever use that. The off-roader's not a bad club if you get it leveled up before some of the others, because it does have some distance. The Razor is a really popular club, and you're going to find that you're going to get a Razor and you'll be able to use that club. The Amazon has good distance, but other than that, unless you get at really high level, it doesn't have a lot of the stuff we're looking for other than distance. The Nirvana is kind of the goal if you're looking for rough irons, and you can see that the Nirvana, especially when you get it up to level 7 where it's 100% accuracy. I found that every step along the way with my Nirvana, it really shot. So at level 7, instead of it being 100% accuracy, it actually was a 50 accuracy. So instead of being 1 per ring, it was actually 2 per ring. And the same thing when it was at down here at level 3 where it's 74, or even better yet for easier math, at level 2, instead of 60 accuracy, it was actually a 30 accuracy club. So just remember that when you're working out your rough irons, you're going to have to kind of feel your rough iron to see where it's at. I can't speak about how the other ones work, but I know the Nirvana, and I've used it for a long time, is pretty much half the accuracy that it says it is. So make your sheet. Let's go back in the game. Make your sheet for the clubs that are in your bag. And then what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna show you some videos that I shot, and it'll kind of be a little jumpy. So if I'm talking in it and I say something I already said, I shot a bunch of videos, but I didn't always get the right wind to kind of demonstrate how just small adjustments, especially on these lower courses where you only have these smaller winds, how these small adjustments can make a huge difference in your game. So I'm gonna show you some of the shots that I made just so that you can see kind of where the ball lands and how these small adjustments will help you out a lot. Okay, to start off with, excuse me, just so we have some terminology correct, I'm going to get in here and play my rookie account. And so that we have some terminology right when you're playing, so you know kind of what I'm talking about. So if I say something during it, I'm going to just kind of go over some of the real basics here. Hopefully I get to go first. 77 goes first. So on this account right here, if I pull the ball forward, I pull the bullseye forward, you're going to notice that I hit this red line. So that's the max for my driver. So anytime we talk about the red line, you're up against the red line. That's the max for that club, whatever club it happens to be. Now, if I was in a wood right here and I pulled it forward, eventually it's going to switch back. It's going to switch over to my driver in this case. Or if I pull it back, you can see right here it's switching over to my wood. So now I'm in my wood range and I'm at the red line of my wood, and then now I've transitioned over to my driver. So when we talk about being at the red line where you're at the max club, that's your maximum club. That's the maximum distance that that particular club will go. Whereas this is the minimum distance that that club will go. So you got maximum, minimum, and then anything in between obviously is your mid. So if you're watching the videos that are online where they're talking about wind, and they talk about, we're going to make a different adjustment at maximum, we're going to make a different adjustment at minimum. Maximum is pretty much exactly what the rings come up with. So if you got 100 accuracy, it's 1 per ring. And depending on the club, at minimum accuracy, at minimum club, it may be a little bit less, and at mid club, it's going to be, it's going to be a little less at mid than it is at max, and it's going to be a little less at minimum. That stuff is kind of advanced. When you first start, don't worry about any of that. When you get up and you start getting 5, 6, 8, 10, 12 mile an hour winds, then especially when you're closer to the green, and most of the time when you're making those mid and minimum adjustments is when you're close to the green and you're trying to pinpoint, get that ball in the hole. So don't worry about that when you're new. Don't try and confuse yourself. The first goal is to learn the rings, and then worry about once you get into the little bit higher tours and you start getting more wind, then you can start worrying about making those micro adjustments. Now, if I pull to the red line, and you can see half the circle is in the red line and half the circle's out. So all of the part of the circle that's on my side of the circle, that's on your side, that's not in the red line, you can make adjustments for it. So like for instance, on this particular hole, you got a 2.9 tailwind. If I was adjusting for it, I can pull the ball back to adjust for that wind. Whereas if I had a headwind here, and maybe it'll switch over and we'll have a headwind this time. Now it's on the same round. So in this case, if I come in here and I'm up against the red line and I push up against the red line, that's as far as the club can go, and I want to make this 2.3 adjustment. With my Apocalypse, I'm at 1.7 per ring. So I'm going to use that take shot down here, and I'm going to line up, and I know it's 1.7, so 2 would be 3.4. So I'm probably about 1.5 rings. So the wind is going away from me. And what I'm going to do is I've got it set up, I'm going to drag the center back to the take shot line, and I've compensated for that 2.3 wind. So the 2.3 wind's still going to affect the ball, but I've compensated for it by adjusting that out. Now, a lot of these drive shots, especially on this hole, where you're just hitting out into a really wide, big area and you only got a 2.9 wind, it's not going to affect you a lot. But if you line up here and you had any topspin, let's say you had your extra mile and you put your 3 topspin on it, you're going to end up out there in the rough. And so the 2.9 is actually going to push your ball even a little bit further. So even if you adjusted for the wind right here, you're still probably going to end up in the rough. So you still have to place your ball properly. But one of the things about placing the ball is giving yourself an opportunity. Now you can see my orange line is up against the rough right there. A lot of times I see guys try and get right up against it. Well, if you hit a great ball to the right, you're going to end up out there in the rough. So when you're setting these shots up, especially when you're new, and if you really want to have success with the ring method, with any method, is always give yourself an opportunity. Don't be riding right up against something, because if you miss this shot, even if you hit a perfect shot and you can't quite see where the dot is down there, you might clip the fringe, or the rough. But if you hit a great shot to the right, you're out here, and you're definitely going to end up either in that rough or you may trickle into that sand. So give yourself some leeway when you're making these shots. I usually try not to go any further in than the orange ring. That way I can give myself a great shot to the left or the right and still be able to put that ball in a really good position. So think about where you're putting your club first. I always like to aim my shot first. Get my shot lined up where I'd like it to go. This is where I'd really like my ball to go. I'm giving myself lots of room on the rough. I don't really have to worry about a lot of curl. If you got a new club, especially if you got a new extra mile, the most topspin you're going to have is 3. So, and on this hole, you don't really have to push the limit. And it's a whole lot better to end up in the fairway out here than it is to end up in the rough up there. Because when you first start, your rough iron doesn't have good accuracy. It's not a very good club, but you're going to be working more on your clubs from hitting in the fairway. So try and stay in the fairway. Now we got a 1 mile an hour or 1.2 mile an hour wind. This extra mile is 2.1, so it's about half a ring. So we'd adjust for half that ring, and then we're going to try and snap this shot off before we run out of time. We're not going to make it. So we're going to put our ball where we want it. We're going to give ourselves some room so that we can hit a great shot on the right, or we can hit a great shot on the left, and we can still make the shot. And this hole, you don't have to worry too much about distance, so you don't have to go the whole 3, although you could. But it doesn't really matter. You definitely just don't want to be in the rough up there. Okay, so once you've got your shot set up, that's where I'd really like my ball to land. Now what you need to do is compensate for the wind. So you're going to come down here and use your take shot. And we know that each ring is 2.1, so we're going to go about a half a ring. Now there's a couple ways that you can do this. You can do it this way right here where you move it a half a ring. Or, we'll do it on the other account. Sometimes I don't feel like I'm getting in the right spot when I go to the center of the bullseye. So you set your shot up, give yourself a little bit of topspin. Okay, and we're going to compensate for that 1.4. So we know each ring on this club is 2.1. So we're going to start right here on the edge. And we know each ring is 2.1. And we got to go 1.4. So we're going to go about 3/4 of a ring. So I'm going to go about 3/4 of that ring. And sometimes when you're not up here in the center where the little blue circly things are spinning, it seems like you can get a little more accurate, especially when you're doing these small adjustments. If you're doing big wind adjustments, this is a question my buddy asked me, is like, hey, I'm dealing with 10 mile an hour winds. Or let's say a 15 mile an hour wind for this club. We'll go back to this account. So you come out here and you set your ball up where you want, you get your little top spin on there, and then you're going to adjust for, let's say you had a 15 mile an hour wind. Well, hey, this club's only 10.5 for the whole ring, so 15 is going to be somewhere out here. What you can do is line up on the outside, and there's 10, and then reset. There's 11, 12, 13, 14, here's 15. Then you're going to reset it out there. So you're going to make that adjustment, and you can double dip it. The other way you can do it too is, let's say you had a 12 mile an hour wind. You can set out here, there's 10. So there's 10, and then you can keep dragging as long as you hold it, and you can drag it up to the next one and do it all in one move. But those are some of the basics on how to set that. Use that take shot down at the bottom. Make sure you give yourself room when you're taking these shots, and that's going to help set you up. All right, so here's some videos of some shots that I took just to see how it works in actuality. if I can get the video. And we're going to be using the same clubs, and what I'm going to try and do is adjust for the wind on my account and not adjust for the wind, and try and hit the same shot so that you can see where the ball ends up and how even small winds, 1 mile, 2 mile, 3 mile an hour winds, can make a huge difference on where you end up. Because you hit perfect shots when you're new, you hit a perfect shot and you end up in the rough and you're like, I wasn't aiming to the rough, I hit a perfect shot, how did I end up in the rough? You ended up in the rough because you didn't allow for the wind. And what you really want to do is be able to give yourself the opportunity to hit a great shot on either side and still be in the right spot. So here, 77, and this hole is not one of those holes that you need to go a mile on. There's a lot of these holes. This account normally just uses a quarterback, and if you're new to the game, while a quarterback doesn't have the distance, it definitely has the accuracy. So it's a lot better club to use, except for the fact that when you're brand new, you need the distance so that your woods become effective. So it's kind of a catch-22. The extra mile you get relatively early. It doesn't have a lot of accuracy, but you need that extra distance because your woods, in a word, blow. Okay, so I want my ball to end up right about where my little blue marker is. I want it to end up in that area. So I'm gonna, and the ball's gonna get pushed back 2 miles an hour because of the wind, but I want to wait for a crosswind before we really talk about wind, because it'll be evident how the wind really affects your ball. So hopefully on this next shot we'll get a crosswind. And even though it's a 1 mile an hour crosswind, if you got new clubs, you probably only got about 1 backspin. And you're not going to have ball guide like this, so you're not going to be able to see exactly where the ball's going. And you can see, like, if I want to get up there, I'm hitting the red line, I'm hitting the limit of the club. So on this one, I'm going to aim it right at the hole. And I'm not going to allow for the wind. I'm just going to shoot it. I'm going to think, wow, I got it in there. The wind doesn't matter. And I hit a perfect shot. And I ended up about a ring. That was a good 1.5 yards, 2 yards, the way this game measures distance. And you got a new club, so you probably don't have a lot of backspin. And I'm using a different wood here, so it's got a lot more power to it. So we got the wind facing away from us. The wind's going in this direction. So what we're going to do is we're going to adjust for the wind. On my big dog, it's 2 miles per hour per ring, so I've only got about half a ring. So we don't have to make that big of an adjustment, but we need to make a little bit of an adjustment. Now the key here is to try and hit a perfect shot. And you're in the hole. So not adjusting for the wind, you're 1 yard off. Adjusting for the wind, you got an albatross. Now, I'm not saying that that's the way that it works every time, although that was pretty awesome to get on video. Now, when you're close to the green, really close, like where I'm at, wind's not really going to affect your ball. The club's not going to get the ball high enough in the air for the wind to adjust it. So when you're new, what you see a lot of people do is they're trying to adjust for the wind, or they're putting it off the hole. So when you're new, put that ball right against the pin. Make sure that your tail is right against that pin. Now I've got really good ball guide on this, so you can see where my first bounce is. I'm giving myself the opportunity to roll, but just put it right in the center of the hole. Don't think on these really short shots that the wind's going to affect that ball at all, because it's not going to affect that ball at all. And if you put yourself over here or over here, you're going to end up missing exactly where you put that, because the wind's not going to affect this ball at all. And in this particular case, I can hit, because of I'm doing that bump and run, I can hit a great shot and it'll still go in the hole. That's why you're going to see a lot of the guys that have better clubs, and this is why you're upgrading your clubs, are going to use that bump and run, because it doesn't matter whether they hit a good or a great shot on the left or the right or a perfect shot, it's going to go in the hole. Sometimes when you're new, you're actually better off doing a dunk, but you need to hit more perfect shots in order to make that dunk go in. So once again, we're on a shootout here, and this is let's see what kind of wind we get. Unfortunately, we got a 3.5 mile an hour headwind. So you're here and you line your shot up. Let's see what Daniel's going to do. He's going to try and land on the green with his Guardian. That's one of the reasons why people use Guardians, because they can be close like that and give themselves maximum backspin. And then he can still adjust. He did not adjust for the wind there, so he may end up in the rough at the front of the green, and this ball is going to end up being very short. And that's exactly what happened, because he was in the right spot, but then he did not adjust for the wind. So he was in this spot right here, and he lined it up where he thought it was going to be perfect. But because he did not adjust for the wind, we got a 4 mile an hour. I'm on my sniper. It's 1.1. It's 1 mile per hour per ring. So we're about a little over 4 rings. This is where his ball ended up, because he did not adjust for the wind. So if you're in this spot, we put a little bit of top spin on it, and we're gonna get as close to the front as we can so we can ride that ball up there. If we shoot this ball right here and we do not adjust for the wind, once again, we're going to be back over in here. We're going to end up hitting in the water. So you have to make that adjustment. And what you're going to do is run out of time and make Daniel happy so he can get some coins. Now let's see if he makes the wind adjustment this time. Okay, so we got a 5 mile an hour crosswind. A little bit in our face. So once again, he's going to try the same move, and let's see if he adjusts for the wind. No, he can't adjust for the wind because he's right up against the line. So he's going to move the ball. Let's see if he makes any adjustments at all. He doesn't make any adjustments at all. So unless he gives it a little bit of overpower, he's going to end up to the right, and there's a good chance he's going to hit the rough. And that's just because that 10.23, he made that 10.23 because he did not make that small adjustment for the wind. So when he was in this position right here, and he had all of his backspin on there that he wanted so that he could end up with the hole, and he lined it all up and got everything perfect. The wind's blowing in this direction. On my sniper, it's 1 mile per hour per ring. So he ended up 5-3. He ended up in this spot right here, and look where he ended up. That's right where he ended up, and that's right where he aimed, because he did not adjust for the wind. So if you put the ball where you want it to be, you got the wind facing away from you, and we're going to make a 5.3 adjustment. Now look at where I'm aiming, but the wind's going to push my ball as it flies through the air, and it's going to push it back into that spot, and we're going to be pretty close. If you don't make those wind adjustments, then you're going to end up right where Daniel was at. And when you're new, hey, it's great to get in the hole. It's great to make one of those big long chip ins, but the deal is when you're brand new, the key is stay on the fairway and get on the green. In real golf, it would be called getting on a regulation. So if it's a par 4, getting on in 2 and putting for birdie. This hole here, this is a prime example. 2.1 mile per hour wind. Nothing. Okay? Put a little bit of backspin on it. You probably are using a white ball, so you don't have any curl, you don't have any of that stuff. And then we're going to aim, and you can kind of see, you don't have the ball guide that I have, but you can kind of see where that first bounce is on the green, and kind of see where the ball is going to travel. This course kind of angles to that direction, so we're going to put it right there. Then we're going to make an adjustment for the wind, 2 miles per hour. So that's about 1 ring. And then we're going to try and hit a perfect shot, and we're going to have to snap this one off. And we hit a great shot to the right. And we end up 2 yards from the hole. Now, very slight wind, 3 miles an hour going forward, using a white ball. We come down here. We're going to put no more than 1 backspin, because if you got new clubs, you probably don't have more than 1 backspin. We're going to try and come out here where we can imagine that ball is going to roll into the hole. So we're going to be right in that spot right there. That's about where we were at with the other account. And we're not going to make any wind adjustments. Now that 3 miles per hour on this Saturn is a ring and a half. It's 2 miles per hour per ring, ring and a half. That's where my ball is going to end up. And now I'm going to end up with just that small amount of wind. I'm going to end up being 6 yards from the hole. So we're going to try and hit a perfect shot. And I hit a great on the outside. And the deal is that yes, you want to hit perfect shots, but the reality is we're going to hit more greats than we hit perfect. And now I'm 6 yards, 7 yards from the hole. 6 yards from the hole. And you're going to lose a lot of shootouts because you didn't make that little bit of an adjustment. If you'd have hit that great to the left or the right and you made the right wind adjustment, you're still going to be within a couple yards. Okay, this is a good hole, especially if we get some side wind here. Yes. Okay, so this is a prime example with this kind of wind. We get our ball where we think we need to be. We're trying to go straight at the hole. We got a little teeny bit of backspin. Now, if we don't make any adjustment for the wind's going to push our ball 3 miles an hour in this direction. So our ball is going to end up 1.5 rings. And we're going to be either in the sand, and even if we make the shot, we're going to be a good 6 to 10 yards away. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to put our ball where we want it. We're going to make the adjustment for the wind, 1.5 rings, and we're going to run out of time. It's funny when you watch those guys shoot the videos, Tommy and Zachary Jones and Cam. They're talking and they're doing all their stuff and they're still hitting spectacular shots. It's not as easy as they make it look. So you got a new club, a little bit of backspin, kind of visualize where that ball is going to go. Try and stay as close to the hole as you can, like in a direct path. It will drop just a little. Okay, but you don't want to be up here because then it's going to roll down that hill and pick up speed. I'm going to wait on this so that we can do both shots again, and hopefully we'll get another side wind. This is a very small wind, and you think, wow, just a 2.2 mile per hour wind doesn't make any big difference. It makes a huge difference when you're playing on these courses, especially when you're doing the shootouts. These shootout holes, those little teeny wind adjustments make the difference between, now here it's even better, you got a 1.3 mile per hour wind. So on this account, we're going to make the adjustment for the wind. We're going to put the ball, kind of make sure we can hit the same exact shot with the other account. It's 2 miles per hour per ring, so there's about a half a ring. We're going to go 1.3, make a small little wind adjustment. Hitting the perfect shot. And we're in the hole. And we'll try and hit the same shot on this one, but we're not going to make the wind adjustment. And let's see how far the ball's off. So we're in the same area here. And I'm a very spot player when I play these. I played this enough that I know that whenever I play, I want my orange ring to be right up against that bunker, no matter where you put it. I normally put a little bit forward and I use a little more backspin, but if you're new, you're not going to be using a lot of backspin. So we're not going to make any adjustment for the wind. And let's see how far off our ball is with just a 1.4 mile per hour wind. Now let's see if we can hit it perfect again. And we hit it great on the, we actually hit it, we actually compensated for the wind by hitting it great there. So we're going to be pretty close. Just because we hit it great. That's why sometimes you'll hit a great shot and it ends up being perfect and you think, wow, I lined that up, I was all right, I was good. But you weren't actually good. If you'd hit a perfect shot, you would have been in a bad spot. If you'd hit a great shot to the left, I'd have been in a really bad spot. So I got really lucky there, not adjusting for the wind, and then hitting a great ball on the side that the wind was coming from. So when you're new, a lot of times that's exactly what happens. You're not hitting perfect shots all the time. You're hitting great shots left or right, and you end up hitting a great shot that kind of compensates for the wind when you didn't adjust for the wind. So you get this impression that, hey, I'm doing okay, but the reality is that if you'd hit a perfect shot, which is your goal, you actually would have been not in a good spot. Come on, side wind. Side wind's what we need. So we got that 1.7 mile per hour side wind. And while that doesn't look like a lot, you got new clubs, you got about one. We're going to try and visualize where that ball is going to roll into the hole. And so we don't make any adjustments for the wind. This ball should end up, on a Saturn it's 1 mile per hour per ring, so we're a little shy of 1. It should end up coming up there, and it'll still roll towards the hole. Don't get me wrong, on this particular hole, because it slopes in that direction. But this should be about 2 yards away, 2 to 3 yards away. And that's not going to win you a lot of shootouts. Okay, we're 2.7 yards away. That's not going to win you a lot of these shootouts. And when you're new, you're thinking, wow, I'm 2.5 away. I'm going to win. It's not going to win you a lot of shootouts when guys are adjusting for that little teeny bit of wind and they're ending up at 1 yard away. So we're in about the same spot we were at with the other account. My Saturn is 2 miles per hour per ring, so half of that's 1 and half of that's 1.4. So we're going to make that small adjustment. And we're going to try and hit a perfect shot. And that ball should be less than 2. Just because I made a little teeny adjustment for a 1.4 mile an hour wind. So I want to thank you for watching the video if you watched it all the way to the end here. Hopefully you learned how to make those small adjustments for the wind. Hopefully the ring method made a little more sense just by playing on some of the smaller tours where you're dealing with smaller wind. And hopefully you'll start using that method to give yourself a little bit better chance on those shootouts and adjust for that little bit of wind. And don't be too frustrated with this game, because the way that it matches up with the trophy system, you're going to be playing guys that are in your same level. So when you first start, if you're using some kind of method to allow for the wind, you're going to be a lot more successful against those guys, and you're going to go up, you're going to get trophies pretty quick. But once you get to a certain amount of trophies, when you start to get into the 1,000 to 2,000 range, you're playing guys that are have been playing the game and kind of like it, so they're trying to learn and trying to figure that stuff out, and you're going to match up with guys that have the same skill set that you have, and you're going to end up playing days where, you know, you may go on a slight losing streak. But if you have a method for adjusting for the wind and you play safe where you're in the fairway when you first start, you play in the fairway, you get on the green. If you play like that when you first start until you really learn the game, then when you get in the upper tours and you get higher winds where you need to overpower or you need to do some better spectacular shots, you're going to have the skill set to do that. But don't be too frustrated when you have days. Earlier, before I shot this video, I played 12 matches in Tour 10 and I lost 6. So I ended up at the end of the day with exactly the same amount of coins that I had when I started. I was able to pop open, you know, get some Tour 10 chests so that I could fill my 4 slots. And, you know, it wasn't a great day. I didn't end up with a net gain on my coins, but I did get to go out and I learned a few things about some of the holes, especially some of the new shootout holes. I keep notes on that stuff on my little cheat sheet. And so the game is just, as you progress through, it's going to get harder and harder because you're going to get better and better players and the competition's going to get really good. But hopefully by making those small adjustments when you're a brand new player, it'll give you the confidence to continue to play the game and you'll have a lot more fun. So thanks for watching the video. Have a great day.